Welcome everyone to Psyched. Now, Psyched is a special show where we zoom in into specific psychological or studies, and we look at research and we look at different exciting thoughts and insights that essentially are from the world of psychology, and we bring them to light. Now, joining me obviously today, as always, will be my co-conspirator Andrea Chu. Andrea, welcome to the show, and we're gonna talk psychology, right? And you love psychology, and you're a psychologist and studied psychology, and a couple of weeks ago we talked about the Stanford Prison Experiment and the devastating effects and some of the insights that we learned on how environment shapes people. Following through, we talked about Stanley Milgram's experiment, where basically by just instructing people and saying, hey, you do this, people, because they're people in authority, right?
Yeah.
People just get scared by authority figures and just listen and go about following their instruction. And we see that played out with the Power Distance Index, right? Hofstede pulled together this index, and he looked at countries especially high on Power Distance Index, like Malaysia, which is number one for many years in the Power Distance Index curve. And one of the insights that we found is that when somebody's in authority or wearing uniform, people tend to respect, tend to obey, but there's some consequences to it, as we saw with Hitler with the Nazis in World War II. So we talked about these things, and today we're going to go slightly deeper, right? Because we're still talking about environment. And how environment sort of shapes you and makes you who you are. But this time, one of the things that we're going to talk about is how environment actually can impact you psychologically, emotionally, and potentially even scar you, right? So what are we going to talk about today, Andrea?
All right, cool. So I think we've talked about psychological safety, but not called it out before, right? We've talked about how people need to build trust, people need to be able to be transparent. And so all these words, right? It was a research that began in the 90s about psychological safety as well, and why is it so important to have it at the workplace? And we're going to talk. We have a exciting special guest later on with us to talk about her experiences as well, as a young adult coming into the workplace and what she has experienced or some of her friends has experienced. So I mean, let's deep dive into what psychological safety is.
Yeah. So psychological safety, I think it's very interesting. I mean, there's many different definitions from people out there, but one of the definitions I really like is basically something that was postulated a couple of years ago. I think it is in 1990, if I'm not mistaken, by one of the first early researchers that looked at psychological safety. And he says, look, psychological safety is a condition that one feels. You feel included. That means you feel part of a team, a part of a company, a part of an organization. You feel safe to learn. You feel safe to contribute. You also feel safe to challenge the status quo without fear of embarrassment, marginalization, or being punished, right? So I thought that's the simplest, clearest definition. But if you look at Abraham Maslow, so some of you, who study psychology, you understand the Maslow hierarchy. And the Maslow hierarchy, one of the first part of the Maslow hierarchy is actually psychological safety, right? Because essentially, when you look at the Maslow hierarchy, it goes all the way up to finding meaning in life, right? So most of us, or what we call self-actualization, which is the tip of the pyramid, right? So at the starting point, it's about feeling safe, right? Having basic needs met, being able to be part of a community. Those are all what we call psychological safety. So in Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the first 2-3 areas, right, is psychological safety. Then it comes financial safety and financial security and sort of knowing that you can take care of yourself. And then it comes to, I want to be part of a sense of belonging, a sense of community, and later it goes all the way up to self-actualization. So psychological safety is something very basic at a family level, and we see that, right, with many children that are in families that they don't feel safe psychologically, or there's no psychological safety. It causes significant pain and trauma later years. Again, if you watch a lot of these bad guy villain movies where they later turn out to be bad guys, a lot of it is precipitated in families that are broken, in families that are downtrodden, where the parents abuse these kids. and ultimately it results in trauma later in life. But I think today we want to talk about psychological safety in the workplace, right, Andrea?
Yes,
Your
that's
thoughts, your thoughts on psychological safety?
I think a lot of people don't talk about this openly at the workplace, right? This is just a term that it's like people know that we should achieve that in the workplace. People know that we can expect that. But when it doesn't happen in the workplace, nobody talks about it, right?
Yeah,
And this
yeah,
is where the role of HR comes in, because you are supposed to be the gatekeeper between the employer and the employee. And what's being pulled up as well, having psychological safety is not just all the mushy feelings of being trusted and being welcome, being excited about something. It's also about how do we drive teams forward, right? And this is a more of a strategic part of business. I think Roshan can be able to share a bit more, and how psychological safety can push us forward as teams, right?
sure.
And when we talk about families as well, a lot of workplaces love to say this, right? We're a family. But then when you see the culture in a lot of the workplaces, they are not a family, right? They don't have that trust. They don't argue enough. In families we argue a lot, but in workplace, if arguments don't happen in workplaces, it might be a sign that there is no. That's my thoughts actually. If we're
Sure,
not
sure.
comfortable to argue with each other, that means there is no safety.
Yep, and I see a lot of people are tuned in. We've got Major Dr. Prabhakaran, who says interesting discussion about relating uniform with Hitler, and so that's probably another topic that we have to talk about, right? Men in uniform and the power that they yield, both good and bad. Esther, sort of attachment styles having an impact on psychological safety. Absolutely, Esther and Ida. Ida, welcome again, and Ida's our big fan. I think every show you're on, Ida. Thank you for being supportive. Tuesday morning, wow. It's Wednesday here in KL, but in Seremban it's Tuesday morning. So here's the power of Ida to bring back time. Well done, Ida. In Seremban it's 24 hours behind. So there you go. The Ant-Man in action, right? I mean, we got the time warp that's happening. So Ida, but welcome to the show. I think there's a typo, but great to have you with us. And so when we talk about psychological safety, I think I mentioned this briefly. About this hierarchy, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And when you look at psychological safety before safety, it's more important, right, than actually the safety needs, right? And then it goes love and belonging, and then goes esteem, and then finally goes to self-actualization. So it's something that and Maslow's theory was what, tons and tons of years ago, right? I mean, he's one of the pioneering psychologists, right? So it's not something new, It's just that I think when we look at the workplace, we've never really talked about the workplace needing psychological safety. But even more than ever before, today we need psychological safety in the workplace. And I think one of the most interesting things when we talk about psychological safety is also to talk about psychological danger. Right. So when you look at your workplace, right, and you think about, I can make a mistake, and I can admit my mistake. I can fail. I can learn from my failure. I can, have an idea, and even though it's a stupid idea, I can share it. I can be part of the decision making. Maybe I'm not, right, but I know what the rules are and the boundaries. On the flip side, when I make a mistake, I get scared. When I do something wrong, I try to blame others. I don't want to share things. I try to keep things for myself. And when you see conditions like that, you basically have a toxic environment, right? An environment where psychological safety is not really in high positive demand. It's really the other way around. I see a whole bunch of comments coming in, so I'm just going to take a couple more comments. And Ida transformed to Wednesday morning. No worries, Ida. We got that. I just thought it was very cool. And I see one more person coming in. Besides HR, can employees really do anything about it? And Sashi will get there in a second. I want to talk about the most comprehensive study done on psychological safety. Right. So one of the most comprehensive study that was done on psychological safety is by a company called Google. And Google actually and Google didn't look to study psychological safety. So Google in 2012, I think, right? They were
2016.
16, is it? Oh, so recent. I thought it was like a long time ago. But maybe they commissioned the study in 2012, and then they spent a couple of years doing it. But if I recall, I forget his name, the Google HR guy who was a former GE folks, who he was telling me, or at least I understood what it was a couple of years ago, that they wanted to study high performing teams. So the issue was, let's study high performing teams and let's understand why some teams are super high performance and some teams are not. Is it because they're smarter? Is it because they're more talented people? Is it because they somehow have a process that is better, that makes them stick and gel together? And what they found was very, very surprising, because at the end of the day, they found 5 key reasons on why teams succeed and teams don't succeed. And I'm going to tell you those 5 reasons. In fact, I'll show you a little video in a second on why teams succeed and not. But one of the things they found is that it was not because of brilliance. It was not because I had the best, most talented people in the room. In fact, football, Google didn't have the study. I can tell them up front. There was a football team called Real Madrid that tried to create dream teams for many, many years in the 90s and the 2000s. And every time they failed, so it's like, let's bring the best players and put them all together. And then in America, right, they said, let's do the same thing. Let's create a basketball dream team. And they brought all the best of the NBA together and said, let's put them in the Olympics. And they failed also. So dream teams generally don't succeed. So it's not about having the best talented people together. It was actually a more profound item, and the number one thing which contributes about 60% of what makes high performance team is this element. So let's watch Google study and then just jump back deeper into psychological safety.
One of the biggest questions is how to build the perfect team. And in fact, about 4 years ago, Google invited me to come spend some time with them because they were in the middle of a big project called Project Aristotle, a huge data study to try and figure out how to build the perfect team at Google. Initially, their hypothesis was that the best teams are teams where you put people together who like each other, right? Maybe you need a good mix of extroverts and introverts. Maybe you need people who are friends away from the conference room. And so they looked at the data and they did experiments and they found that who was on a team actually didn't matter at all. They couldn't find any correlations between team membership and team success. So then they started looking at how a team interacts. And this is where suddenly everything became clear. Because what they found is that the people who are on a team matter much, much less than how those people interact. That you could have enemies on a team together, or you could have strangers or friends or people who don't get along, or all introverts or all extroverts. And as long as they treat each other a certain way, as long as there's a certain culture, then that team will gel. So as they started looking at these behaviors, what they found was that there were 2 in particular that mattered more than anything else. The first was called equality in conversational turn-taking. During a meeting or a set of meetings, if everyone speaks at roughly the same amount, then that team is much more likely to succeed. But just speaking isn't actually enough. The second characteristic that teams need in order to do well is called ostentatious listening. That basically, in addition to encouraging you to talk more, I, as a team leader or team member, have to show you that I'm listening by doing things like repeating what you just told me or closing my computer so I can make eye contact with you. If you have these 2 characteristics, conversational turn-taking and ostentatious listening, it creates what psychologists refer to as psychological safety. And psychological safety is shown as the single greatest correlate with a group's success. When a group feels like they are psychologically safe with each other, you unlock their best ideas, their ability to work together, their innovative capacities. Google's fundamental belief, as is true for many other companies, is that it's only when a team comes together that you actually get the best ideas out of each person and the best work at getting things done.
Okay, so as you watch this, right? One of the things, and Google, actually there's 5 things, right? There's and later we'll kind of highlight some of these 5 things, but the number one thing, more than 60% weightage, right, is psychological safety, right? And I think one of the things that's very interesting when I started digging deep, and there's a great article on Leronomics.com on Project Aristotle and some of the key findings, so we'll put it out in the chat so you guys can check it out. But one of the key things that they really found is that if it's not about who is in the team, it's how it's the process. And I think the two pieces they talk about is the culture that's created, and it's how people interact, how people engage with each other, how people talk to each other, how people get things done, how people work is much more important than who is in the team. So put a bunch of average people there together, but they have the right environment, they have good psychological safety, they are likely to perform better than you put a 99%, a person in the 99 percentile, the top, the 1% percentile, the top of the top of the top, the Harvards and the MITs and all these superstars, put them in the room together. But you don't have the right environment, then you're asking for trouble. Right, so that's how psychological safety is so powerful. I see a couple of questions coming up from numerous of our audience. Ida said, "Is psychology got connection with NLP and neuros?" We'll talk about that in a bit. Ida, good question. Dr. Kuldeep Singh, nowadays another important concept is psychological well-being. And I think, Andrea, you love that's one of your pet peeves, right? So we can get together. Ida, we'll get to your question in a bit. How to deal with coworkers who play politics? Can this issue relate to psychology? Say absolutely, and we will browse into that. I think Divya's gonna and Andrea's gonna take that. The Galacticos, okay. I think Sashi is still thinking about Real Madrid. Guys, that was just an example, but and Anil, good to see you too. And for those of you who want to read more about Project Aristotle, click this link in your feed. So if you're on Facebook, if you're watching from Facebook, there's a feed there. If you're watching on LinkedIn, we will add that link into LinkedIn shortly also, and also on YouTube. So all of you be able to get access to it. And keep your questions coming. But one of the things I think we want to talk about, Andrea, a little bit about psychological safety is, tell us a bit about, okay, so how do we create an environment where psychological safety can thrive, where we build a psychologically safe environment? And what are your thoughts on how we can do it? So we know it's important, but how do we fix it?
Right. I think it comes from the video, right? It seems very simple, right? Being able to have someone speak at the same amount of time as everybody else, and having the same amount of time to actually listen. It seems such a simple concept, but it's so hard for us to do, because when we get into a meeting, all our walls come up. We have to look competent. We got to please the boss. We cannot say stupid things in the meeting. We cannot argue. A lot of these beliefs start coming up in our heads, right? So the first thing is to create that environment. If you're a manager or you're the person who leads that meeting, then you got to have these kind of things set, right? Okay, like when it's like when teachers go in the classroom, right? It's a very common thing to see that, okay, this person is not speaking a lot in the classroom, right? When we ask questions. Now, can we point it out and say, hey, can you share with us your thoughts, right? I think that's one very practical way to begin. Right? Begin to actually, hey, I haven't heard anything from you. Is there anything you'd like to share? Right? Having that space open up first, it's one of the practical ways. I think there's a lot of other ways as well. I think the Harvard Business Review is shared very practical steps and tips, like approaching conflict as a collaborator, not an adversary, right? I think that's another thing. When we approach conflicts, right, we either want to fight or flee. Right? We don't take a pause and say, okay, let's see how this is the situation, what is the objective standpoint, and then figuring out. Most of the time we blame, right? And it's one of the symptoms of what non-psychological safe workplace is. We start blaming instead of thinking, okay, take a step back. How do we actually work throughout this issue or this conflict and solve it? And there's a few more. But I think one other interesting thing I wanted to point out as well, and it's in relation to what Ida is saying about neuroscience, right? There is a neuroscience behind why psychological safety is important and how that develops. And it ties back to what Roshan said last week, right? Oxytocin. Oxytocin is like the most important hormone I think we've talked about so many times. And when you have that kind of level of trust and the ability to share with your team members on certain things, oxytocin increases, and then it becomes a reinforcement for you to say that, okay, I can actually share my opinions, get shut down, but they don't take it personal, right? We move forward with the team. So I think those are some ideas and concepts behind neuroscience and why psychological safety is something that actually happens with our bodies as well, not just a state of mind or an environment. It actually works in a hormonal excretion way, right? And it's very interesting. The more oxytocin we pump into a certain behavior or a certain cultural belief that is being practiced, then it becomes reinforced and that becomes your culture. So I think those are some ideas I have. Rochelle, what about you? What do you think?
No, and you know, there's a ton of little things that can be done. I feel one of the most powerful things is to build rituals that enable you to build psychological safety, because we're very ritualistic people, right? So we gravitate towards rituals. So if you create a ritual that says, during this 30 minutes we have to act and behave like this. And it's very strange, you know, if you look at Silicon Valley, one of the most ridiculous rituals they have is called the Burning Man, where everybody goes crazy for 3 days and goes into the middle of the desert and do ridiculous stuff. But you know what they find is, by that ritual they get people to be very collaborative, because you go and have a shared experience together in the middle of the desert where everybody goes shirtless. I don't know what happens there, but essentially it rituals are very powerful to position psychological safety. Now, on the flip side, there is a danger to psychological safety, right? And welcome back to Psyched, and we are psyched because we are in the middle of very interesting discussion on this whole concept of psychological safety. And I think Google has made it very sexy with Project Aristotle. So if you check out the link below, you'll be able to check it out. Now, one of our audience is in stitches. I'm not sure why, but Pavintran is just ha-ha-ha-ha-ha-ing. Well, hopefully this is not, you know, we've got some good comedic moments in exchange, but we also have some good insights that we're bringing to you. So I want to talk about psychological safety. And I think, you know, we're going to just have a quick video of some of the benefits of psychological safety. But after that, I want to dwell maybe for about 2 or 3 minutes on the danger of having environments that are overly safe, and what that means for you and your employees. So let's watch this video on some of the benefits of psychological safety.
There are significant benefits associated with fostering psychological safety, particularly to support efforts to drive innovation. Employees working in psychologically safe environments are more comfortable asking questions, more comfortable giving and receiving feedback, better able to openly discuss mistakes, comfortable to fail and learn from failure, able to put forward unorthodox ideas, experiment, and feel able to offer opposing perspectives. Through the sharing of ideas and openly owning errors, individuals are able to grow and learn from their mistakes. But the benefit of learning through trial and error extends beyond that of the individual, as it enables teams to learn collectively. When individuals consider the environment to be psychologically hostile, they are more likely to blame others, have a reduced desire to take risks, have increased anxiety around failure, exclude others, and not contribute. Whereas psychologically safe environments support individuals to be authentic, increase interpersonal risk-taking, collaborate, learn and innovate, include others, and participate. Research shows that psychologically safe workplaces motivate employees to learn and develop their capabilities to perform better in their roles and their teams.
Okay, welcome back. So we know there's a lot of power to having and developing psychologically safe workplaces. But Andrew, I wanna and you know, I see some comments that we may have missed out. I think one of the good comments was from Major Dr. Prabhakaran, who says, great topic, do explore how to adopt this comprehensive soldier fitness program, where Martin Seligman, who's a great psychologist, shared the principle of post-traumatic growth. And I think, you know, it's something that, you know, potentially we should talk about later, and maybe we can understand that a little bit more down the road. So thanks again for your comment, and let's understand some of these things on post-traumatic growth. But I want to talk about the flip side of psychological safety, because, you know, some companies will come and tell me, Roshan, hey, you know, we do this thing, we care for our employees, you know, we're a family, blah, 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 and we do all these wonderful benefits. And what happened is it becomes so comfortable, because we are so psychological safe, and this happens with kids also, right? You make your house so beautiful and wonderful and cozy that the kids never want to leave the house because they're so safe. They have huge psychological safety as a nest. And one of the things I think that the Google study and other studies have said is that psychological safety does not mean only showering care. It's like a parent, right? You care, but you also dare. And there's two elements to it, right? it's about, and this is where it's very interesting, and that's why they become high performance teams, right? Psychological safety is you have, as a boss, right? You and as also as employees, right? You have the ability to care for each other, collaborate with each other, but you also have the ability to dare each other, to push each other, and it's safe for you to do so. And that's very important for us to understand. It's psychological safety is not about creating a cozy environment, a foosball table, Andrea made a mistake. Oh, Andrea, okay. It's like, okay, you made a mistake. Fine, that's great. Yeah, what did you learn from it? And are we going to fix it? Come on, Andrea, let's fix it. Let's figure out how to get there. We still just because you make a mistake doesn't mean the target disappears, right? The target is still there. We found one way not to get there. Let's find another way to get there, right? And that's what psychological safety is. It's both caring and daring. And I think that element sometimes get mixed up when you read some of these papers. There's a lot of articles on, create a trusting environment, create this, create that. But I think the key is, it's about high performance teams, right? Psychological safety is about caring and daring, right? And I see a question, how do we find the right balance from Sashi, and I see another one, great insights about Aristotle, and you look forward to read it, and yes, do read it. But how do you find that balance? I don't think it's about balance, right? It's context, right? To me, when I look at almost anything, talking and listening, these are two opposites, right? But sometimes you talk and you be 100% talking. Sometimes you listen and you 100% listen. Sometimes you need to quit a project, but sometimes you need to fight on, right? So when you look at leadership, right, it's very much extreme in the traits of leadership, right? Leadership is about sometimes using data, but sometimes it's using gut. Now, when do you use gut? It's not a balance. Say sometimes I use gut, sometimes I use data. It's about knowing at the right context you use guts, the right context you use data. Sometimes you quit, but you quit at the right time, like Nelson Mandela quit at a certain point in time, right? So to me, I don't think it's about balance, but it's about knowing when. Look, I need to know at this point when a person is emotionally scarred, when there's grief in the organization, I need to enable myself to fix the grief in the organization. But at some point in time, when they're reattached, when they're bonding, I need you to perform, and I need you to dare. So it's a combination of care and dare in equal bouts of 100%, 100%. You don't go like, let's half care and half dare. It's 100% dare and 100% care. Gerard says, good day, psychological impact on behavior which influence decision making, notably for strategic purposes, either rational or intuitive basis, which ultimately leads to impact on how an organization, right, especially during a crisis scenario like the pandemic. And what your thoughts on Andrea, and in fact, Gerard, we should invite you on the show one of these days to come and have a chat. Gerard's a great psychologist also to some extent. So we need to get you on the show. But another great comment out there, and keep sending in your comments. There's a great article from McKinsey that talks about psychological safety, which we're sharing out there. So a lot of great content. Now, Andrea, today is special because you wanted to talk about psychological safety for young people, especially interns, and you have a very special guest. In fact, a superstar social media influencer who's currently an intern, right? A young lady who, in spite of her young age, is already an influencer who's out there in doing youth marketing and so on. You want to do a quick introduction, and I know you said, when young people talk, the people with no hair and who are old need to be removed. So I think the producer is going to remove me any second now and shut me up. But tell us a bit about our guest that's coming up.
Okay, cool. All right. So we have a very special guest with us. Her name is Divya. She'll pop up the screen in a bit. But let me leave the introduction to herself. I think she can articulate it much better than me. So Divya, why don't you introduce a bit about yourself before we proceed?
Hi, Andrea. Thank you for having me here. And hello to everybody that's watching. So I'm Divya. I'm a freelance content writer. I'm an entrepreneur. Just started, and I have a major in public relations, but I would say that I have a vast experience in learning mass comm as a whole. So I experiment with a lot of other majors as well. I try to do a lot of things as well. So yeah, I think that's about me. It's very simple, very cute.
All right, thank you so much, Divya. I think underestimate the things that you've achieved. That's amazing that you're an entrepreneur, you started it, right? So I think we're going to dive deep into psychological safety and some of the experiences maybe you've seen, heard, or even experienced for yourself, in the workplace. But right before that, I think Esther has a game for us, and we like to invite people on the chat to also play it with us. Esther, you want to come on board and tell us what this game is about?
Hi, thanks for having me. Hi Divya, hi Andrea, and hi everybody who's watching. Yes, we will be playing Never Have I Ever. So what better game to play, right? To test your employee stuff. Okay. So essentially what Never Have I Ever is that I will ask a series of things, and then you will show whether you can type it out in the comments, or for Andrea and Divya, you can just show out whether you have or you have not done that before. I think you guys just prepare like a piece of paper, right, that indicates have or have not.
Yes,
so yeah,
correct.
so let's just get on with it. Okay, so that's the first one. Never have I ever attended a Zoom meeting in pajamas, or any meeting in pajamas.
I don't know if you can see, but yeah, I have.
Okay.
I have to, obviously. Right. So
Okay.
I also wanted to take a break before we continue. Those who are in watching in, I want to hear your answers too. So go ahead and put it in your comments and reveal yourself and have some psychological safety right now in the chat place. I want to see whether you have actually worn pajamas to your Zoom meeting. I would love to see if there's a CEO who does that, and I would, befriend you after this. All right, Esther, what's the next question?
Okay, the next one. Never have I ever worked from bed.
I'm just calling myself out here,
We have. Yes.
Okay.
Yvonne says never ever. Eric says of course. So those are really cool answers over there. All right, what's the next one?
Nice. Okay. Never have I ever attended a call before you washed up in the morning, before you washed up or brush your teeth.
Okay. No, I
Never.
cannot.
Okay.
I cannot
very
bring
good.
myself to do
Towel.
that.
Okay. Next one. Never have I ever called out a coworker or a supervisor for their errors. We're getting a little juicy here. Nice. You guys want to talk more about that?
We'll talk about that later.
Nice. Okay. Maybe just one or two more left. Never have I ever ignored a work call for whatever reason.
Never have I ever ignored a work call for whatever reason. Ignore, okay? The keyword is ignore.
Yes, the keyword is ignore.
Oh,
Okay.
wow. I need to ask Divya after this.
Okay, that's okay. I'll leave it to Andrea to talk to
Alright.
Divya more about it. Okay.
Okay.
I think that's all from me.
Thank you,
I hope you guys
Esther.
got to know each other better. Okay.
That was
thank
fun.
you.
Okay, all right. So I think Divya, before we go in, right? I want to just highlight a few comments in the chat. So Yvonne mostly has never done all the things we have done, and I think Eric has done most of the stuff that we have done, right? And I think Pavin Chun also say, he personally thinks that psychological safety should be a culture from young age. Mostly in classrooms. He's observed where teachers mostly shame and discourage students who are trying. I think that's a very important topic to talk about, like education as a whole. But let's dive back deep into currently with Divya, as an intern, as a young adult coming into the workplace. What do you think psychological safety is to you?
Okay, so psychological safety at a workplace basically means that I'm able to express what I feel with the current task that I'm given. If I'm uncomfortable, I should be able to say it. And the fact that how people talk to me, my supervisors and my co-workers, like how it's a very, how to say, sometimes I feel like it's very personal because different people have different expectations and how they deal with people. But for me, I personally feel like I should be able to communicate well, and I should be, like, I don't want to be misunderstood because we all have different personalities and not always that our personalities match. But I just want there to be an understanding of how I do things and how I'm comfortable with doing things, but doesn't mean that I'm spoiled, like saying like, okay, I will only do it this way. No, I want to be able to find that middle point, and I want to be given that space to find the middle point instead of just saying, look, this is how we work and you have to follow it. That's it. So yeah, I think that pretty much sums up what it means to me.
Okay, all right. And I think Yvonne also says, right, speaking out, right, being safe enough to speak it out. It's not that, have that conversation and decide ultimately, this is the decision, but actually having that conversation and being safe enough to actually share it. No hierarchy barrier. I think that's spot on, Yvonne. And there are so many red flags that most likely millennials or young adults go into an internship program or a workplace or even a part-time job, right?
Yeah,
And this is
yeah,
not a great
definitely.
environment to be in. Yeah, and maybe do you have an example or have you experienced these red flags before?
I think I have, but not how to say, not firsthand. Definitely, I've watched my friends go through what I call internships from hell. So one of the red flags that I see sometimes I come across, is that people say, the coworkers say, or the supervisors say, we're like family. We're always in touch. We're always there. So I was like, what? Wait, like it's an internship, it's a professional working environment. Why did your supervisor say that they always keep in touch? And then later on, I realized that if a text comes in at 11 p.m., my friend is required to answer or required to respond because they always keep in touch because they're family. You always respond to your family. Say, oh, it's 12 p.m. It's okay. It's in the middle of the night. I'll text you asking for a cup of water. That's how family works. But imagine if that's how it works in a working environment, and someone just like texts you at like one in the morning and saying like, look, XYZ, I think I need this document, so can you send it over? And I think that's one of the red flags that I see. But I do realize that when people say that, oh, we're like family, they actually mean the close bond they have. But I feel like from the experiences that I have, it's a little scary. It's like an orange flag for me.
Orange, not that red, yeah, not red hot
Yeah,
red.
yeah.
Okay.
No,
And don't you think that it is pretty manipulative, right, to use that kind of concept of a family keeping in touch and then demanding these things from an intern or even just a young adult, a fresh graduate? And I've had my fair share of red flags as well in workplaces, and it's horrible, right, to think that some environments out there, especially the culture, it is so normalized that even interns like yourself, like before coming into an internship, you already got scared. Like, oh no, this is what I'm going to expect. You expect the toxic environment. Now, how messed up is that kind of culture that we have, right? And I think Yvonne mentioned as well, no, she has many proteges working with her, and supervisor or leader needs to provide the support. And that's very important, having support and also a place for them to feel free to speak their mind and being safe enough. All right, so I think that's a very good sharing from Divya. Thank you so much. I do have one more question. What
okay.
would be a green flag for you to say that this place is a safe environment for me? Besides being able to speak up, to share and communicate like some of the struggles you have, what is another green flag you would look for?
I think one of the green flags that I look for is definitely during the interview. People tend to ask you, what are you comfortable with? Like what are your likes, what are your dislikes, how do you communicate? The fact that the employers try to understand the way that we work, and they give us they try to understand you before even demanding things from you. When you want to ask help from someone, you try to understand if they are in the situation to lend a hand of help, to help. You don't simply go to someone without hands and like, can you lend me a hand, right? I know it's dark humor, but I'm so sorry. But yeah, things like that. It's really important. And one of the other green flags that I see is how they communicate with me in the beginning. People tend to come off very, oh, so this is your salary, and these are our working hours, and like, this, I expect this. On the first day, it's just an interview. Imagine you're going to go on dates with someone, and on the first date, this person says, I expect to get married to you. Yeah. So those are my expectations. I expect that you stay in a long-term relationship with me. These are the goals that you have to reach. If you want to take these and you want to keep dating, I want you to make sure that you can promise me 3 dates a week. That's not how it works. It's I would say, like, when the employer comes and asks, so, like, imagine I'm the employer, but it's a dating scene, okay? So how many dates a day can you promise? Do you think you can, do you think you can reach this goal? And do you think there's a middle point that we can meet? All of that stuff. When the employer takes the initiative to understand where you're coming from, what you're capable of, and how to push you in the right direction so that you can improvise. So yeah, that's one of the green flags.
Okay, all right. And I think we mostly have another conversation later on. How most HR would argue with you and say that no, this is how we have to do it, so that the millennials will get in line and they understand what we want from them and stuff. So I think thank you so much, Divya, for sharing with us. I think we have a lot of questions here at the comments. I think one last question for you is actually from Sashi. He said that
Okay.
would you consider as a red flag, and is it important to call it out, right? The key word here is call it out. As a young adult coming into the workplace with pretty much very few experiences, you're talking to a person who has like 10 years and above. How would you call it out?
All right, it really depends on what matter is it. If it's something to do with disrespect, I believe that age, experience doesn't come into point, but it's two humans and you're disrespecting me, and you're just disregarding everything that I have that I'm capable of. So I mean, I won't go crazy. I'd be like, throw hands and stuff, but I just be like, look, I do not appreciate the way that you're talking to me, and I'll talk to you when you're ready to talk to me properly. And I try to avoid those situations. If someone is just, like if a supervisor or someone from the upper position is just losing their calm, and I cannot deal with those situations. It's not that, it's not that I can't fight back or I can't argue back. It's just that I don't want to, because out of the respect that I have for that particular person, for the experiences, for the years that they have worked, for the number of people they have dealt with, maybe they're just having a bad day. So I don't want to just assume things out of them, but I have to set my boundaries. I have to say, look, I don't appreciate this. I'm going to leave this place. Come back to me when you are ready to have a calm and collected conversation. Disputes and misunderstandings should be able to be resolved in a calm and collected conversation, not throwing, blaming, pointing fingers. I really don't appreciate that. And I will, without doubt, call it out. And I'm not afraid of the consequences, because I have that is something to do personally. You get what I mean? It's my respect that I have for myself. And it's very important for me to set boundaries when it comes to these things. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Divya. I think one point I can take from, a short conversation with you is, as a young adult, have those boundaries and being able to communicate it in a calm, professional way. Be the bigger adult in the room, as some people would say it, and talk to that supervisor, right? So thank you so much again, Divya, for coming and joining us. I think we are going to welcome Roshan back, and we're going to answer a few questions on the comments.
Yeah,
right?
no, and I thought some great insights from Divya. One of it was about that interview process, and I straight away saw a comment coming from our HR head, Shalini, who's like, no, I'm good. I have followed exactly what Divya outlined as the green flags and so on. So Shalini, well done. Our Lee Ramix HR person is protesting that she's a good HR person. So and we agree. I think we all agree that, right? But it's interesting, the dialogue, and I see one comment from Pavintran who says, yes, mostly the employers judge the interns based on their age, thinking that they might do mistakes all the time, which prevents them from giving freedom to their interns. And eventually is fearful and restricted to voice out. And I think it's double-edged, right? Because I think on one side, there is a perception that many people have that young people are not going to be capable, they're less experienced and so on. On the flip side, the young people are less experienced and less capable, and so there's need to be a little bit more hand-holding. So I think, especially with young hires or interns, there needs to be a lot more hand-holding that happens, and that provides psychological safety. The fact that you imagine when you were just born, right? If your parent says, okay, here's a milk bottle, here's what, go and figure it out,
diapers.
right? It's like, wait, give me 3 years, change my diapers and feed me for about 2-3 years, and then I'll figure it out, right? So I mean, the same thing comes in the workplace, right? And it's not, oh, I'm the kind of boss who just gets you and then you got to figure it out, right? Hey, there is a certain things that you can be figured out, but there are certain things, that is not, right? And I think, the other point that Yvonne makes, I like, is that, the culture, when you interview, the culture is very critical. And sometimes you can't really see the culture by what they say. It's by what's happening behind the scenes, right? So I think those were very good. I see one LinkedIn user that asked a question: how do you see the roles that psychological safety and knowledge sharing may play in the relationship between humble leadership and creativity? I think that psychological safety is created by leaders that want ultimately to drive high performance teams. So whether you're a humble leader or an assertive one or otherwise, right, or a creative one or a structured leader that says this is the way, I don't think it's saying that psychological safety is only confined to the creative ones or the humble ones and so on. You can be an assertive leader and you want to just get things done and push, but that doesn't mean you cannot create environments that have psychological safety and are able to share knowledge and create trust. So like what the study that Google says is not about whether you're introverted or extroverted. It's not about personality. It's about process, right? It's about creating that right culture in place. And I see another LinkedIn user that asked a question, and maybe we probably have to wrap up at this point in time, Andrea, and close out this show. I know it's been very engaging, and thank you so much for all your questions and comments and games and engagement. And I enjoyed the game. I wish I got a chance to play that game, and never ever maybe next week. Yeah, I'm putting mine, and then the producer just cut me off. I'm like, no, you can't play because when young people play, old men have to run away. Okay, never mind. We'll figure that one out for next week. Do you think driving team building brings better psychological safety? Since many believe team building is a crucial activity in the company, thinking it will bring a great bond, your thoughts, please. And team buildings are great. Now, see, sometimes when companies run team buildings, they run it because they say, let's do it because it's a retention ploy, right? Okay, we need to give them something and a reward. Okay, let's just give them a team building, right? But if you really think about the essence of team building, right? The essence of team building is to build a team, is to create bonds. So think about a team like this. When you start out a team, when you hire somebody, they're attached to your company, but they're not bonded to the employees. So you need to have a process to enable them to bond, right? And psychological safety, the safer an environment is, the more likely they bond, and they bond faster. So if you watch, again, I go into Marvel a lot, but if you watch Avengers, the first episode, right, you brought a team of superstars together, but they were not bonded. They were fighting each other. Thor was throwing people here, and Captain America was fighting with Iron Man, and all kinds of shit happening, right? And then suddenly, a process happened where they started to become friends and they started to bond. And then suddenly one Avenger falls from the building and another one catches him or her, and so on and so forth. So you start to say, hey, what's happening? They're actually working together as a team. And that's what bonding does, right? Now, bonding, there's always going to be somebody that leaves the team. The moment that person leaves the team, there's grief, right? When there's grief, people cannot reattach to something. So there's a need to have another activity or intervention to help people to grieve so that they can get reattached to the new thing, right? Or the new business or the new business unit, or sometimes you have a restructuring. So when you look at team building, I always look at it as, look, it's a very important bonding process, but sometimes it can be used as a grieving process to enable you to reattach to something else, right? And this is where structures are very important. Technology, we have very powerful technology today that enables you to basically create bonding opportunities, to facilitate collaborative opportunities, to enable people to compete and run together. Because when you run together and compete, who run more today? You have a shared commonality, and that's what psychological safety is. It's about creating commonality. It's about creating shared experiences, and it may be a good experience, a bad experience. One of my worst experience was when Hui Ming and Hui Ming, I hired her. She's my co-founder at Lyra-Mix. We were in aviation, and about 4 or 5 years, she said, those were the good old days. I'm like, Hui Ming, are you dreaming? Remember in aviation, we stayed till 2, 3 a.m. and we came back at 5, 6 a.m. in the morning, and we were working our butt out because it was it was a crisis, right? We were trying to turn around a company. But because we were bonded, because we had this shared experience, even though it was not a very good one, later it turned out to be good when we did the transformation. We reframe it in our mind as an amazing experience. Wow, that was great. Sleeping 3 hours a day and working 20 hours a day was fantastic, right? Because there were shared experiences, and that's what power of team building. And I want to end with this, and maybe Andrea, if you have 1 or 2 thoughts, I want to share a tool that I think is one of the most powerful tools to create collaboration, to create bonding. You can have a jogging together, even though we are working virtually. Everyone can compete, in terms of who's running more, who's exercising more. You can have town halls, you can have universities, anybody can teach anybody, and that's how shared experiences, that's how, to me, the best team buildings are shared experiences, and that's the power of team building. So to answer your question in a very long way, and I'm going to show you a little video of one of the most powerful apps, I think, that can be used to create psychological safety. Yvonne, thanks for joining the session. It was great. Andrea, your final thoughts before I show a little video and we'll close out today.
Okay, all right. I think I have 3 final thoughts. I'm going to make it very concise. I think one is one of the stats that shows, psychological safety comes from different types of leadership. One of the key correlations is consultative leadership, supportive leadership, and, as we say, challenging leadership. Those are 3 key ones. And I think one thing that we'd like to depart on you as well is something called situational leadership. Turning your leadership positions according to the situation and according to where the person is at, right? Where they are at that point of time. And I think what we're going to show you after this will give you a tool, a way to measure psychological safety and also measure where your team's performance is, that will help you become the leader that is either supportive, challenging, or, as Roshan says, at different extremes at that time for the right person at the right time. So I think those are my concluding thoughts.
Fantastic. And the comments keep coming in, so I'm going to entertain them for maybe another minute or so before I show the video. Insightful session. Thank you for the conversation. And Pavitran, every Wednesday at this time, we have this conversation. Every week, we explore a different psychological experience. So join us every Wednesday. If you're in Asia, it's Wednesday. In the US, it's Tuesday night, right, for you, or midnight, sometime around there. And Sashi has a question for me. Since you missed out, Roshan, here's one: never have I ever cheated in a football match. Cheating can be defined in many ways. So did I ever fall down so I can get a penalty? Maybe once or twice. So with that, let me show you a most exciting tool that all of us, I think, can use. And it's really, really cost effective. It's one of those tools that I find, something that we implemented in Leaderonomics happily, that enables us to build a psychological safe environment, help employees to recognize each other, and help employees to engage and contribute and be connected with each other. So goodbye for you. We'll see you next week. And I'm going to end with this little Happily video. So enjoy Happily, and we'll put some information on how you can get access to Happily in the social media chats. See you guys next week. And thank you, everyone.
Are you ready to get started?